Welcome, dear listeners, to another episode of Inside the Mind's Archive, the podcast that dives deep into the intricacies of the human mind. I'm your host, Leila Sakal, and today we embark on a journey through the fascinating world of ADHD in children. But first, let's set the tone right with our catchy slogan: unraveling minds one thought at a time. Now, let's zoom in on ADHD in children. What is ADHD, and how does it manifest in the young minds navigating the complexities of the world? ADHD, or also known as Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, is one of the most mental disorders affecting children. Symptoms of ADHD include inattention, not being able to focus, hyperactivity, excess movement that is not fitting within the setting, and impulsivity, hasty actings that occur in movement without thought. ADHD is considered as a chronic and debilitating disorder and is known to impact the individual in many aspects of life, including academic and personal achievements, interpersonal relationships, and even organizing your day and functioning or cleaning up daily. ADHD can lead to poor self esteem and poor social function in children if not appropriately treated. On the other hand, adults with ADHD may experience poor self worth, levels of self criticism through life differing on adults than children. 8.4% of children and 2.5% of adults are diagnosed with ADHD. ADHD is often identified with disruption in the classroom or problems with schoolwork, but this type of hyperactivity more diagnosed with boys as symptoms present differently in girls. Opposing to boys, girls tend to have an inactivity, meaning more onto struggles with focusing internally. These are the three main types of ADHD: predominantly intensive presentation, oopsies, predominantly hyperactive impulsive presentation, combined presentation. Inattentive refers to challenges with staying on task, focusing, organization. For a diagnosis of this type, ADHD 6, this type doesn't pay attention to details or makes careless mistakes in schools, jobs, or tasks, has a problem staying focused on tasks or activities such as during lectures, conversations, or long reading. This type doesn't seem to listen when spoken to. They don't follow the instructions. They don't complete any work assigned to them through school, jobs, or at home. They have a problem organizing tasks for work. For instance, they don't manage time as well and they have a messy, disorganized work, and they miss deadlines. They avoid or dislike tasks of sustained mental effort, such as preparing reports and completing forms. They often lose things that they need for tasks or for daily life, such as keys or school papers or books, wallets, cell phones, and eyeglasses. They're easily distracted and they forget daily tasks such as doing chores, running errands. Older teens and adults may forget to return phone calls, pay the bills, or keep appointments. Hello, brains and heart. We're moving on now to the motivation with ADHD. You know that thing that I was supposed to do, that episode? Well, about that, we don't always do what we intend to do. Why? Because between intending to do it and actually doing it, there's a big chasm. With most tasks for most people, that chasm is bridged by motivation. We'll call this the motivational bridge. Keep that in mind. And it is built using motivational planks. Like this will be good for my career, or it will make my parents proud, or I told a bunch of people that I would do it, so I'm going to do it. Motivational bridges aren't always perfect, but little gaps in the bridges can be overcome with willpower, self discipline. I don't want to do the thing, but if it's important to me, I will. I might not have the motivation, but I'll have enough to get me there. Unfortunately, ADHD, on the other hand, is what Dr. Russell Barkley refers to as a motivation deficit disorder. For example, something might be just as important to ADHD as to anyone else, but that importance doesn't give them as many motivational planks. They don't have little gaps in motivation. Half of the bridge is missing, which means we might want to cross that chasm and do the thing we might put a ton of effort trying to. We just can't. This can be a really confusing and frustrating thing for kids with ADHD that can't see the missing planks and they don't understand why they can't just cross the bridge and get to the end. They can just get over the planks. Why can't we get over ours? We must not care. We must be lazy. It's also a confusing and frustrating thing for us when it is a bridge we've crossed before, a thing we have been able to do before. This is why many ADHDers tend to feel like they might really be lazy or they might really not care. They know they can do it, other people are doing it, so why can't they? Well, it's not just about that. The time that we or other people can do things, it's because they have more planks. So if we want to get something done and we're having a little trouble doing it, or if we want to support an ADHD brain we love, what do we do? How do we fix that motivational gap in the motivation bridge? The first step is to find out what ADHD kids find motivating and what they don't, because this also differs from a build of neurotypical brains. According to research, ADHD brains have trouble with tasks that are lengthy, repetitive, or boring. On the flip side, there are a few things that give ADHD brains a crunch of motivational pranks, such as things that are urgent, things that are new or novel, and things that are of personal interest. Or, in other words, things that are stimulating or engaging to our brains, which is also why stimulant medication and exercise can be helpful for this need for stimulation. It isn't a choice, but it's how ADHD brains work. Some tasks naturally include these stimulating aspects, like video games. Video games, anyone? Which is why they hold our focus so well. But for those who don't, we can add these stimulating things. We can fill in the blanks. 1. Make it urgent. One way to do this unintentionally, or one way that we do this unintentionally, is by procrastinating. We might struggle for weeks to get started on a paper, but when the night before it's due comes, as a sense of urgency kicks in, and suddenly we have all the motivational planks to get over that bridge. Sounds familiar? That might not be the healthiest thing in the world, but there are other ways in which we can generate a real sense of urgency. Creating artificial deadlines is kind of a hit or miss for ADHD, since we know on some level that the deadlines are not real. But accountability can make it feel real. Maybe instead of having it on a final deadline for a paper, ask your teacher if you can have a deadline for each draft. If you got a big project at work, meet with a coworker regularly to get your project checked. Want to get your house clean? Invite someone over, knowing that someone will see your house in this mess and soon will give us the motivational planks we need to clean up. And sometimes we don't even need to make the task urgent. We just need to take it in and see everything the way it is. I might not feel like I need to do something today, but if I don't, it's going to put me behind for the whole week. Realizing that helps. Timers are also useful. Setting a timer and seeing how much work you can get done before it goes off also helps. What doesn't help? Seeing someone with ADHD struggling with something and getting something done and being like, it's okay, get it to me whenever. Although this is extremely understanding, it actually takes away from the planks and it makes us less likely that we'll be able to get it done. Instead, ask for updates. Shame-free accountability is wonderful help. 2. Make it new or novel. We can't always do the things, or we can't always do new things, but we can find new ways to do them, or we can find new environments to do them in. Do your homework in a habit. Learn new ways to fold laundry. Try Mary Kondo's method. It might be kind of fun. If you're having trouble with getting yourself to floss, try a variety of flavors to choose from. This concept of always finding a new aspect to doing something, even though it's not something new, or a new technique to do it, or a new environment to do it, can just change everything up. I tend to get bored of my hobbies really, really quick, but I've learned to accept that. Once they get old, I'll put them down for a little while, and I know that eventually they'll cycle back into my routine. But for now, they don't feel new, or they'll cycle into my routine when they feel new again. For tasks that are repetitive, you can try to challenge yourself, or you can find easier, better, or faster ways to do them, or even weirder ways. Studying can be boring, but what if I can do it upside down? What if I can finish it in 15 minutes? Gamification can also be a form to task novel, making repetitive tasks novel by making it immersive and stimulating as a game. Finally, 3. Make it personally interesting. ADHDers are excited about base learners. They are interest based learners. It's a lot easier for us to learn a book in a series that we're excited about than a series assigned for homework. This can be a common case for everyone, but for the people with ADHD, it can be the difference between being able to get it done and not doing it. Anyone who lives with ADHD brain knows that whether we are not interested in a task or whether we are interested in a task can be the difference between it taking 5 minutes and 5 years. So at this point, before I even start a task, I try to get my brain interested in it, personally investing myself, so that we can access this type of flow. Because once it stops being a task and once it starts being an interest, you can just do it out of pure motivation, pure interest. Sometimes we cannot determine the task and whether it's uninteresting or not, but choosing how we do it and shifting the way we do it can make it more interesting. Even for things we have to do in a certain way, we can do it in a way that is more interesting. It's usually possible to find something about it of personal interest even after you do it. Try not to make the task you need to get done compete with another task you might see more interesting. For example, if you need to get this task, this homework task done, but that Netflix episode seems more interesting. So try not to get those two tasks to compete in between each other. Even if we can't find anything else interesting in the task, we can add rewards that are interesting. Rewards can be especially motivating for ADHD, but keep in mind, we experience time differently. Long term rewards are often too far away to be effective. This is why the immediate feedback of sticker charts, raffle tickets, and even verbal feedback or acknowledgement is great. It shortens the distance between behavior and reward, which makes us more motivated and gives us more motivational planks. All these things, making it urgent, making it new or novel, and making it personally interesting, can give us more planks that help us get over that motivational bridge. Do we need to have all the planks in place before we start? No, of course not. N- Jumping over the little gaps can make us stronger and can help us practice more self discipline. But if your bridge has gaps in it, don't waste energy trying to jump that huge gap or telling yourself or someone you love how important it is to get it done. They know. Instead, get curious about what is missing and then fill in the blanks. Who here has had a really hard time doing something that should be really easy? Yeah? Apparently, there's a reason for that. Brandon Mahan had the best explanation for why simple things can be so difficult. And it's a metaphor. And I really like metaphors. He explained it like this: when we do a simple task, like say make a phone call, we're not just dealing with that task, we're also dealing with, get ready, and remember this, the wall of awful in front of it. We can't see this wall because it's not a physical barrier, it's an emotional one. But just as real, and it's just as real even though you can't see it. Now, how does this wall of awful get built? According to Brandon, failure. Every time we fail at a task, we get a failure brick. And with that failure brick comes a disappointment brick. But we usually don't disappoint ourselves when we fail. We disappoint others around us too. So for everyone that we disappoint or think we have disappointed, we get an extra disappointment brick. If that disappointment results in rejection, we throw on a rejection brick. If we're worried that disappointment will result in rejection brick, we get a rejection brick and a worry brick. Eventually, from all this open experience to failure, all these different bricks pile up to construct a wall, to build and become a colorful, diverse, emotional barrier to doing that task again. A wall of awful can come up in our face. Everyone has a wall of awful. In fact, we all have a bunch of them. But those with ADHD tend to have extra. They tend to have extra bricks and they tend to have bigger walls of awful. Kind of like the one I have about this past due process journal. Thankfully, Brandon tells us about what to do about these walls. To break that emotional barrier and wall, we need to get to the other side of it, to do the thing. Doing it is a good plan. So there are 5 ways to get past this wall of awful, and only 3 of these work. And 2 of them do not work at all. But one of those is totally unhealthy and is not a plan. The 2 that don't work are staring at it, not doing anything, and ignoring it and going around it. So staring at it doesn't engage in the wall in any way, and it is not useful. It's not going and going around it is not possible because it's infinitely wide, metaphorically speaking. 1. The first way that works is to get past the wall. We can get and we can turn green. We can put on some purple pants and we can get really mad. And we can Hulk smash our way through this wall. But that also means that we have to get really angry, and that angriness is not easily sustainable. We might damage our relationship with someone that is expecting us to do the task, or our relationship with ourselves. Because we might turn to our friend and be like, "Fine, I'll do the dishes. God, just shut up about it." And while this works, you hurt your relationship. I mean, you got past your wall of awful for the dishes, but it's not healthy and it creates another wall of awful to talk and to apologize to your friend. And this is a very problematic and messy way to deal with a wall of awful. 2. The other option is to Hulk smash inwardly, which is when we start to think about how we suck and wondering, why can't I just do this? What's wrong with me? That kind of negative self flagellation eventually gives us the energy to push through that wall. But that damages our self esteem and that hurts our relationship with ourselves. So to Hulk smash is not a good plan. By the way, Hulk smash, going around and staring at the bodies, is a stress response. So to Hulk smash the thing, to fight it, and to stare at it is literally fight or flight. And it freeze. So those are the sort of skills that are inherited and they're not really evolutionary. They're kind of basic. And they're the basic approaches to the wall of awful that they're not evolved, and they're the most instinctive. So they're not the most efficient ways. We can get past the wall of awful with healthier ways. So, how do we get past this wall then in a healthy way? Healthy way of speaking. One of the ways that function is climbing the wall. And although that looks like staring at it to the observer, because often when we're climbing our wall, what we're really doing is a whole lot of emotional work that takes place inside our brain. So we're sitting with a dread and we're talking to ourselves in our head, untackling, empowering ourselves. I can do it. I need to just start. So almost like gearing up to do the thing. Prepping yourself, giving yourself a prep talk, waiting for that surge of energy to come back. And excuse sometimes we're mentally exhausted. Sometimes we need a little time to recharge, and it's almost like waiting for the music to start so that we can start running again, you know? And so, to tell the difference between staring at the wall or climbing the wall, how can we tell the difference between just staring at it and climbing it? We oftenly can't, but you have to ask yourself. Sometimes, if we pay close attention, we can tell if the person is inquiring and exploring new ways to actually get over that wall, and or if the person is actually finding ways to prep themselves with the main motivation and objective of the wall being climbing the wall, and just and putting their goals and motivation to action. We can tell. Let me give you an example. A kid is taking 20 minutes to get his binder that is holding his homework out of his backpack. They're taking forever to get it out, and the parent goes over to find the binder, puts it on the table, flips it open, and goes like, "There you go. Do your homework." And typically what happens is that the kid snaps, and they either start yelling at mom or dad or their guardian or parents, or the hood goes up and they start beating themselves up and they shut down, losing self esteem. In this scenario, the kid was climbing the wall. The reason why they were taking so long to get their binders out of their backpack was because that was the action, the physical manifestation of climbing their wall. But the climb was hard and it was slow and it was 20 minutes and they were still climbing. Now, when mom and dad insist that they might do the work now, they're saying and they're essentially pressuring them to get to the other side of the wall, not even at the child's pace. And so the only option they have to get to the other side of that wall quickly and live at once is to Hulk smash that thing, ruining the relationship even further. You see, the child sees this emotional barrier as a threat, and in case they were trying to evolve and to approach the homework task with something other than fight or flight, they were trying to climb that wall. And to tell you the truth, most likely this pressure and judgment coming from the parent was the one that sourced the disappointment and emotional barriers that formed the wall in the first place. If we notice that someone is kind of heading towards the thing that they need to do, probably they're heading towards doing that thing. They just need a bit of a longer run length. They just need a run up. What gets tricky is that it is computer based, or when it is computer based, sometimes sometimes we do the computer equivalent of picking up sticks in the yard before we mow. Sometimes we get sucked into the TikTok rabbit hole or whatever it is that we get distracted by. Our priorities being messed up, and because we lacked stimulation, we head and choose the most interesting and stimulating thing, which isn't necessarily the healthiest thing. And we don't realize the time that passed or the thing or what we have been diverted, and we're going somewhere else so that an outside observer can be helpful and they can be careful about how to communicate with us to be completely beneficial and not to create pressure. How can I tell if I'm just climbing the wall or just staring at it? One, you have to know that you have a wall of awful and you have to identify with it. You have to admit it and where it is located for the thing that you're about to start. If you're trying to start the task that you have a wall of awful for, as soon as you feel that you're struggling, you must think, "Oh, I must be climbing a wall of awful." And the mindset is the difference. To think like this is the language and the way that we want to use and to think with ourselves. Because we could say that we're just sitting with the dread, but sitting and procrastinating are very stationary verbs. Climbing is an active adjective. Climbing the wall and that little refrain can help us move forward toward the task we want to engage in. You are doing worse, even though it might not look like it. You're doing work, sorry, even though it might not look like it. It's just emotional work. You are climbing a wall, specifically the wall of awful. Now, let's shift our purpose into how people with ADHD might develop unhealthy habits, particularly in the pursuit of dopamine, the brain's reward neurotransmitter. Everyone gets bored, but those of us with ADHD tend to get bored a lot. According to ADHD researcher Dr. Patrick A. LeCount, boredom is what happens when our brain aren't stimulated enough to stay interested and focused on the current activity. Whether or not we get bored doesn't just depend on the activity. It depends on one's ability to regulate their attention. And difficulty regulating attention is the core feature of ADHD that's associated with reduced activity in the frontocortical network, including the prefrontal cortex or the PFC. Are you bored yet? That reduced activation is because ADHD brains are chronically understimulated, and it makes us more prone to boredom, which means that we're doing something that most people find a little boring. And if we do something that is boring, us ADHD kids, to us, it can be painfully boring to the point that it's painful to tolerate and that we need to get out of that place. According to Patrick, being more prone to boredom is not only a feature of ADHD, it's also associated with the negative emotional experiences such as anger, depression, and anxiety. On top of all of that, the network includes executive functions that depend on stimulation to function. It's not just that we don't like being bored, it's that our brains don't work as well when we are. When an activity is engaging and when there's plenty of dopamine hitting our brain receptors and our dopamine receptors, our brains get the stimulation they need. Our executive system function work better when we feel better. When the activity isn't engaging enough, we go looking for some more stimulating stuff in other ways. For example, our phones, laptops, social media, TikTok, Instagram, gaming, drawing. That might seem weird to those around us, but our brain makes it in our ADHD brain, it makes perfect sense. It's a coping mechanism. Sometimes our stimulation seeking is productive. Most likely, and most of the time, it's harmful and not exactly adding to the quality of our life. Sometimes it makes it really fun to be around. Other times it can be actively harmful to ourselves, our others, and to our goals. Social media. Most people stimulate themselves harmfully and unhealthily by day drinking, impulse spending, obsessing over social media, pointlessly ranting about social media, procrastinating until anxiety sets in, and taking out many projects to avoid being bored. And most often, picking fights with basically everyone, specifically siblings. Before, in the old days, ADHD children might be in trouble or in timeout for throwing something because they were bored. But the real problem is that kids nowadays are stimulating themselves through social media and escaping their boredom intensively and excessively, ruining and losing their lives for the easiest and quickest source of dopamine. Why do we do this? You know, when you're really hungry, you're probably not going to go and take the time to make a healthy meal. It's like that. When our brains are already hungry for dopamine, we tend to turn for the easiest and quickest source of it, which often isn't the healthiest way or not the most enjoyable. You see, the hardest things to do are the things associated with healthy dopamine because once you have to work hard for something and once you have to work hard for a reward, that's the healthiest way of producing dopamine. And easy ways of producing dopamine, like just going on social media, is empty and it's not healthy. And it can often leave you feeling nihilistic. A lot of the time it's not even what we want. It's a lot of the time it's not even what we want to be doing. Our brains are just kind of on dopamine. They're seeking dopamine seeking autopilot. One way to break that autopilot is to use the mindfulness tool STOP. S. Stop for a second. T. Take a breather. O. Observe what's going on and around us. P. Once you have find out what you want to be doing and if this is actually procrastinating and unhealthy ways of dopamine, proceed to doing the thing that you really want to do, whether it's different from the task or whether it is the task. Let me give you a case. I want to practice my painting and shading skills because I was bored. But I picked up my phone and I'm about to scroll mindlessly for 3 hours straight and not stop and then beat myself about it. Oh, observe. Do I want to scroll and feel bad about it and feel bad about myself? Or would I rather be relaxed, painting and practicing and developing my skill? 2. Am I still playing this game because I want to be playing the game? Or am I just having a really hard time stopping? How do I feel right now? Am I tired? Am I hungry? What else is there to do? Then proceed based off of observations. Maybe deciding to doing something differently, or maybe we go back to what we are doing, switching it up. At this point, it's kind of like picking the healthier choice. But that sounds like a lot of work. And when we're already here, it's fun to be right. If you find yourself stuck in the loop, you need to find healthier ways for your brain to work harder and to stimulate itself better with healthier sources of dopamine. And in order to do this, you need to practice mindfulness. Not to shame ourselves of doing something differently, but to remind ourselves when to seek stimulation, what are the go to sources of stimulation, and remind ourselves that we have options and it's not just this unhealthy way that we can actually produce dopamine. Let me tell you about this Dopa-menu. This Dopa-menu stands for dopamine menu, merged together. I'm a genius. It's a menu of activities that ADHD kids can, or ADHDers, whatever you like to be called, can utilize and can utilize to create awareness so that people have healthy choices to choose from when going in all autopilot, making healthier choices to stimulate their brains. The Dopa menu is a menu of activity that we can replace of those unhealthy habits and of those unhealthy ways of stimulation, and that can give us information and ways that we can use to make healthy dopamine and to work hard on dopamine choices in the future. So that even when we know that we're going to get bored, we know when we can seek stimulation and how we can seek stimulation in the best way possible. And we have a go to list of sources of stimulation, allowing us to plan and fit in line with our needs and goals. Kind of like meal planning. You are brain planning for dopamine so that you fuel your brain right when you need stimulation. I organize this menu by the levels of stimulation so that the readers can choose what they need based on their need of stimulation or how much stimulation they need. To break it down, the appetizers are activities that don't suck you in. 5-minute activities, but they give you a quick rush of dopamine, aiming to replace that quick rush of dopamine from unhealthy and self deteriorating sources like TikTok videos on your phone, and to replace that quick unhealthy habit and quick unhealthy dopamine source once you stimulate your ADHD brain right. The sides are activities that you can add to others for more stimulation and more engagement, like, for example, listening to music while studying. The specials are activities that are special but infrequent. The main dishes are activities that can stimulate you for a long time and grab your attention for a long time. And finally, before I move on, these can take up to 30 minutes or an hour. And finally, dessert. These are activities that you can enjoy in moderation and that are only healthy in moderation and in balance. The activities that are sweet only in balance and in moderation. And this menu is a menu of activities that you can choose from to fuel your brain correctly and healthily when it's hungry for dopamine. Not to mention, there are also recipes for different types of engaging ADHD routines that you can follow with the techniques and tricks that we mentioned before to push your ADHD brain into being exciting and to developing and doing what you love doing. Routines that utilize and include techniques to build and plant motivational planks to focus and getting your ADHD brain where it wants to be and engaging and stimulating it in the right way so that you are one step closer to your goals and so that you can become stronger and learn how to reach them through techniques, positivity, and self discipline. And so that we can turn our disability into the best ability. And there you have it, dear listeners, a glimpse into the intricate world of ADHD in children. As we wrap up today's episode of Inside the Mind's Archive, specifically the Dopa-menu episode, remember, every and each mind is unique, and it is in our collective understanding that we pave the way for a more compassionate and supportive world. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, keep unraveling those thoughts and don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating journeys to the human mind. This is Layla Sakal signing off.